Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Amin here and I am filming part 3 of my annual video where I talk about my career as a genetic counselor. I have now been working as a genetic counselor for 3 years, which feels wild to say because it honestly feels like longer than 3 years, but it also feels like I was in grad school just a few months ago. And so over on my Instagram and here on YouTube, I put up basically a question poll to see what you guys wanted to know from a genetic counselor who has now 3 years of experience. If you guys haven't been on my channel before, it's the first time that you're hearing about genetic counseling, definitely go ahead and check out some of my other videos. I film a lot of videos to give you a better idea of what it's like in the life of a prenatal genetic counselor. And so I have videos actually from when I was in graduate school in New York. I have videos of when I first started studying for boards, information about how to become a genetic counselor, the application process, everything. I have a lot of information on my channel. If genetic counseling is something that you're interested in, definitely subscribe to my channel. And if you have any ideas for future videos, definitely let me know in the comments below as well. And so we'll get right into it. I have some great questions this year to go through. Some of them are more geared towards the application process, you know, hearing advice from somebody who has more experience now. And then some of them are kind of just about how it's been for me the last year since I gave you an update. And I am excited to get into it. I have not looked deeply into these questions or thought about them, so you're gonna get my true honest thoughts. Let's get into it. Okay, first question I'll go into. So let's do the ones about like getting into school, application, being a student, and then we'll go more into my experience in the last year. And so one of the questions that I got on YouTube was, what are the things that you did in college that you think helped you become a genetic counselor? I did a lot of things when I was in college. So I'm actually Canadian, we call it university, but I did a lot of things. I basically did not rest until I felt content in the amount of extracurricular activities that I had. And there's really no such thing as being content in the amount of extracurricular activities you have. Basically some of the things that I did, so advocacy is a very big part of the application process. So being able to volunteer in different groups, in different settings, working with people from all paths of life. And so that's very important. It's basically mandatory for any school that you're applying to. And so some of the volunteer work that I did, or advocacy work that I did, so I was a peer counselor on my campus. We basically had peer-to-peer support that was available through the counseling services. And so obviously we had like actually registered counselors and therapists that you could meet with, but some people just preferred to speak to peers, and it was obviously quicker to get an appointment that way. And so I did that. So we did that in person. Basically we had special training, I had office hours, and then people would drop by to kind of talk about anything related to being a student. Sometimes there was difficulties of adjusting to Canadian life, being an international student. Some people, especially in first year, had difficulty kind of just learning the ropes of university. Sometimes it was personal things like relationship topics. So that was a really great start as well, being able to kind of discuss things with my peers, really difficult conversations. I also volunteered at a sexual assault support center. So off campus, again, very difficult conversations, very deep talks, hard conversations, which I think was really important. And I still think about those skills at all times. So basically we had a phone support line, it's 24-hour phone support line, and you would, I think it was like 8 weeks of training that I had to do. And then I had a weekly shift that I did. And then people would call into the support line. And most of it was honestly just learning how to listen. And that is such an important skill. Honestly, a lot of jobs where you are people facing, especially in healthcare, like obviously it's important to be able to save someone's life or give them news that could alter their health and their journey, but being able to listen is a huge skill, which is so important in this field. So that's one of the main things that I learned in that experience. I've heard of many other experiences people have. So I've heard of people that volunteer and work with people with disabilities, maybe being a camp counselor, working with young children, people with genetic conditions, people with autism. It doesn't have to be somebody that has some kind of developmental disability or genetic condition. Like for example, when I worked with people with a history of sexual assault, you know, that's a very difficult conversation. A lot of people do like mental health helplines. There's so many different options, but definitely the advocacy work is very important to do. So that's something that I tried to highlight on my resume when I was applying to these programs. And then another thing that I did was obviously getting as much exposure to genetic counseling as possible. So back then it was mostly just doing phone informational interviews. So this is before like Zoom was even a thing. which makes me sound so old, but I swear I'm not that old. But before Zoom was a thing, a lot of people, we just did like informational interviews on the phone. I had a couple in person if they were like in the Toronto area. And then obviously being able to shadow, which is very, very difficult, and especially being able to volunteer. So there are only a few clinics that take volunteers, and there was, I believe, a year-long wait list, even a little bit longer than a year. So if it's something that you're interested in and you want to be in the clinic seeing what a GC does on a day-to-day basis, volunteering or shadowing is the best way to do that. There's so many resources, I'll link them down below, where you can find GCs in your area. But the good thing now with virtual counseling is that a lot of people are well acquainted with things like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, you know, Google Meets, all that kind of stuff. And obviously using the phone still, like old school phone, you can talk to anybody from anywhere in the world or any other province or state and get their experience. If there's a very niche specialty that you're interested in, you can reach out to somebody who doesn't live near you and still be able to get that information. So that definitely would also be something that I recommend, something that I did. So I had a very solid understanding of what the profession was, and I wasn't just applying for the sake of applying. I knew I wanted to be a genetic counselor, and that came through in my application and then also my interview later on. That was a very long answer, and it's just question number 1. But kind of related to that, question number 2 is, what are things to do if an applicant doesn't have strong volunteering or advocacy experience? You just gotta figure out a way to get your volunteer and advocacy experience. It's something that in my mind is not negotiable. I do not represent the views of any program, and so I can just say, based on my experience, based on watching applicants make it into programs, is that this is not negotiable. If you do not have advocacy or volunteering experience, you need to be able to seek it out. And what they're trying to teach you is how to talk to people and how to talk to people during difficult times. And obviously in prenatal, I do this every single day, but you don't have to have these difficult conversations. Like, there are plenty of specialties in genetic counseling where you are not giving somebody heartbreaking news. You could be working in the lab, you could be working in research, but with all of those, you still need to know how to talk to people. Even in research, you still might be enrolling patients, you still might be enrolling families. You need to know how to talk to people and give results, talk to providers, talk to patients, talk to relatives. People skills is not something that you can just make up and you can just learn in like a couple of years. You really have to build on it. So all of those places that I suggested earlier in terms of advocacy, volunteer experience, reach out to those, figure out what the training process is like. It's really important that it has good foundational training, and then just keep working on those skills, because most likely that is a huge part of your resume that will be looked at when you are applying to schools. And then we had somebody who was starting their first rotation this summer, which is really exciting. They're feeling nervous and they're wondering if I had any advice about starting your first rotation. I actually work with students. I have a summer student right now, and then even throughout the year we have first year students that train with us as well. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice is really getting good at self-reflection, and this is not like a technical skill that you can learn. It just means like in every session that you go in, you need to be able to check with yourself, what do I feel comfortable with? What do I not feel comfortable with? What am I nervous about? And then be able to communicate that with your supervisor. I hope your supervisors are understanding, compassionate people. Chances are that they are, because they are genetic counselors, and that's just kind of the type of person that the field draws. But be really honest and open with yourself and your supervisor. So if you are struggling with something, let them know, and they probably already know because they're watching you do all of these skills. So if you are struggling with something, you know, be open to feedback. That's one of the biggest things. You will be getting feedback your entire rotation, positive feedback, things to work on, and basically you just need to be really open to learning. And also in the back of your mind, keep that everything that you're learning, you don't have to do it every single time. When you're actually graduated and working in the field, you will have your own style, you'll have your own way of doing things. At our clinic right now, it's actually 4 of us that supervise 1 student. And so there's a lot of feedback, and sometimes it's conflicting feedback that we give the student. And we always say, this is my style, this is how I do things. My colleague will do it differently. And when you're graduating and you're working, you will do it differently. That's fine. Take the things you want to take and then leave the things that you don't want to take with you. Okay, now a few questions about my experience in the last year, in my 3rd year of being a genetic counselor. What fulfills you the most in your current role, and has that changed since graduate school? I think it's probably the same answer that I've had for the past 3 years. What fulfills me the most is giving people the information and the power to make their own decision. And working in prenatal, I work with a lot of women. Women are often misunderstood or not taken seriously in healthcare, and being that person to just listen to them for usually over an hour, listen to them and what they want, and always be there for them no matter what decision they make, even if it's against our recommendations, and giving someone that power to do what they want with their body, their pregnancy, their family is something that is just so gratifying. Like, I always think about, like, is there a time in my life where I might not want to be in clinic anymore, because it is draining, like it is stressful, especially in prenatal. It's quite stressful, and I just don't know if I can give up talking to people and helping them through such a difficult time. I've talked about this so much on my channel, but I absolutely love it, even though I am giving bad news quite a bit. It's just something about giving the bad news, but also empowering someone to do what they want with that bad news, like not giving them my input on it, which a lot of doctors do. And I've heard, you know, some horror stories here and there from patients, from journals, medical reviews, things like that, about patients being forced to do things they don't want to do. And so that is the most gratifying part of the job for me, and I think it's been the same. I also think that's a reason, from what I recall, the reason that I wanted to be a genetic counselor and the reason I enjoyed so much of working in the sexual assault support line is because I really wanted to empower women to like do what they want, even if that's gonna be different from what I would have chosen for myself. So that spark is still there for sure. Am I getting like a little bit more worn down? I think yes, and that's just the reality of being in a clinical patient-facing role, having such difficult conversations on a regular basis. I am feeling it a little bit this past year actually, but it's not something that I don't want to do. I still want to be in my role and still be able to care for these patients. So the moment that I don't feel that way, I think will be when I have to reassess and kind of think about where I want to go next. But for now, I still feel the same. Things you struggle with while giving bad news to patients. I was actually just talking to my colleague about this a few days ago, because we give bad news all the time. We are telling people, you know, things are not going well in the pregnancy. We're giving them diagnoses for genetic conditions. And we were both just saying, like, I don't know if it's getting easier necessarily, like the more I do it. Like, there is a level of heartbreak in every single, you know, disclosure that I call somebody with. But I am better at, you know, separating myself from my job and understanding that my role is important and what I do is valuable. And so I think it's a humanistic part of me that will probably never die. Like, I also don't want it to. I don't want to be like a robot. I know sometimes, like with burnout and compassion fatigue, like you kind of feel nothing towards a difficult time somebody's experiencing, but I don't want to be that person. I still want to feel for them, still want to be empathetic, but there is a boundary between being too empathetic and too attached, and that basically deteriorating your mental health and your well-being. And so it is a very fine line. It's something that takes practice, years and years of practice. And so I don't think it's easier for me to give bad news necessarily. Like, sometimes when I get a result and it's unexpected, or I know it's going to, you know, make somebody really upset, I do feel bad for them, but I know it's still my duty to tell them this information and help support them in whatever way that might be. And like I said, that is the best part of the job in my experience. And not everybody will feel that way. Not everybody wants to be a prenatal GC, or even like a cancer GC, or anything patient facing where you might be giving some type of bad news. But that's okay. You don't have to. There are other avenues that you can take in the field of genetic counseling. That's just something that I really enjoy doing. And the last question is, what do you think of the profession in a South Asian context? That's a great question. I actually did a podcast. I will put it in the description below, where I talked about genetic counseling in the South Asian community. I meet a lot of patients from a variety of different backgrounds, and I absolutely love it. I have a lot of patients that are honestly immigrants, a lot of people that are not even residents of Ontario or Canada, people that don't even speak English. I have a lot of patients from a diverse background, and I absolutely love what I do, because again, it empowers them to make decisions that maybe they wouldn't have the opportunity to make outside of the healthcare that we're providing. That's the first thing, but also people even in our own healthcare system don't have the opportunity to make their own decisions. So not to say like we're like a first world country or anything like that. Like, there are a lot of issues within our own healthcare system as well. But within the South Asian context, I think number one, being South Asian myself, or even just appearing brown skin, but also my name is definitely like Punjabi. Like, a lot of people like well, I have my full name and I'll use my full name in all professional matters, but then as soon as they see me, they'll just be like, oh, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, yeah, like there's no, like, it just feels like a different connection, and it's really nice to see that. And I know that's really important for a lot of people. Like, it would be important for me too, and I know it would be important for like my parents, my grandparents, if they had someone that could connect to them on a deeper level in that way. So I do think representation is very important in the field itself. I think one of the issues that we face in the community is people are not open about talking about things in their family, and even within my own family. Like, if I were to think about my extended relatives, I don't really know my entire family history. Like, some of our parents have so many siblings, I don't know anything about the siblings. Like, even for my husband's family, I know nothing. I don't think he knows anything about his own family. And so that is something that I think we struggle with a little bit in the community, is everything's very hush hush. Like, diagnoses are not really talked about, bad things are not talked about, miscarriages, stillbirths not really talked about. And so there is like a lot of growth that kind of needs to happen in the community, but I am very proud to represent the community and also be able to work with people from all different backgrounds, to be able to give them the best care and support. But if you want to hear more about, genetic counseling in the South Asian community, definitely check out that podcast that I was a guest on. It has been a few years since I did that. I think I was in second year of grad school when I did that podcast. Great question overall. So that's all the questions that I have time to answer today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm excited to do this again in 1 year, so it'll be 4 years, which is just, it's a lot to think about. But if you guys are interested in genetic counseling content, definitely check out the rest of my videos. If you want to see more content from me, I obviously post a lot of GC related stuff. I post fashion stuff. I post regular lifestyle vlog content as well. Subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.